Hello there, and welcome to Wildcard Decks, a channel where I like to go through some of the more off-meta options and cards that don't see a whole lot of use. So today we are going through Vader Green with ECL. So, as is often the case with leaders that come out late, you're looking to basically survive until that point. We do also have ways of gaining more resources to expedite that. This deck does have not very many turn one plays, and that is definitely something I would be looking to change in future. But the way I kind of looked at it is, even if I don't have a turn one play, if I have resupply in my hand, then I'm okay with that anyway. So yeah, let's get into it. So in terms of numbers, 28 ground and 8 space, so the space arena can be where we fall short a little bit. Resource cost, we do have a decent late game that we're trying to rush into. We do seem to spike at 3 resources. I think that's a combination of events as well and space units. And then rarity, it's put a massive chunk as them being special rarity, but a lot of the cards, whilst it's marking them as special, they were also available in packs in a different set. So it's a little misleading. But anyway, we do have a few legendaries as well, but it's one of the legendaries is actually very disposable, to be honest. You're not going to notice much of a difference if you don't have it. So anyway, let's get into the deck proper. So Vader himself, if you're not familiar with what he does, because he doesn't see a whole lot of play from what I've seen, he has an action that costs 1. If you played a villainy card this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. So one thing to bear in mind is if your opponent doesn't have any units out whatsoever, it's not optional, so you would have to damage one of your own units. Now that can be good if you've got a super laser technician out and you want to kill it off, then it can be beneficial. Or if you've got units with grit, then that can be beneficial as well. I haven't got any grit units in this deck. And 1 damage to a base, so you could do it to your own base, but there's no reason to do that, so you'll always do it to your opponent. And then when he comes out, he's on 7, so a late leader, but he has pretty good stats to match that as a 5/8, and on attack you may deal 2 damage to a unit. So again, you can kill off a super laser tech, but to be honest, by that point, you're not really going to care about having more resources. So it's just another good way of being able to clear out your opponent's units. I've gone with Energy Conversion Lab. To be honest, I'm tempted to just go with a 30 HP base. I don't always feel like I'm making much use of Energy Conversion Lab, but I mean, you all know what it does. I don't need to go through it. And if you decide not to go with Energy Conversion Lab, you can kind of mitigate losing the ambush factor by putting in Timely Intervention instead. So yeah, I'd consider changing that for a 30 HP base for a bit more survivability. Onto the ground, well, some of the ground units, the earlier game ones. So we've got Death Star Stormtrooper. Whilst it's vulnerable to pings, it is a cheap enabler of Vader's ability because it only costs 1, so you can play this turn 1 and use Vader's ability if you want. Same with Salacious, except he is usable throughout the game because he can bounce back to your hand whilst getting in a teensy bit of healing as we go. First Legion Stormtrooper, I only went for one of them, but I would probably be tempted to swap the Seasoned Shore Trooper for First Legion Snowtrooper completely. The reason for that is because when the Snowtrooper attacks a damaged unit, it gets +2 and gains Overwhelm. The Overwhelm is less likely to happen, but the +2 means it hits for 4. So it actually becomes a viable ECL target in and of itself for only 2 resources. So you do 1 damage to a unit with Vader's ability, it can then finish off a 5 health unit with ambush. So yeah, I would probably ditch the Shore Trooper for the Snow Trooper. Speaking of a Shore Trooper, he was in here because when we get 6 resources, he gets a buff. So a cheap unit that can hit for 4 is always welcome. I've gone for Fifth Brother because we do have some Force synergies as well, so we do want a good smattering of Force units throughout our resource costs. Only gone for 2 of him, but he also synergizes fairly well with Vader's ability because of his on-attack ability where he can deal 1 damage to himself and 1 damage to another ground unit, so you might do 2 damage to an enemy ground unit in one phase. Phase 3 Dark Trooper just for a bit of Sentinel protection. It can be a good ECL target depending on what you're running into, because then it will get an experience because it will survive the attack. If it's not going to survive, then don't ECL it out. Super Laser Tech, this can be an ECL target. I've never been a massive fan of doing that, but if it's going to kill a unit as well, then that's probably the spot to do it in, but I'm not a massive fan of doing that. And then I've got no full resource plays because ideally we're looking to just pretty much skip that completely with resupply or super laser tech. Gone for Darth Maul, another force unit. He is a good ECL target because he can come in and hit 2 units for 5. Yes, he will most likely die at the same time, but that's the nature of him. One thing to remember is if the opponent has a Sentinel out and just for one Sentinel, you can only attack that Sentinel unit. You can't attack 2 units. So just something to keep in mind with Darth Maul. Onto our later game ground units, and we've gone with Rook because he can come in with ECL and kill anything that well, apart from leaders, he can come in and take them out so long as he is doing damage to them. He comes in shielded as well, so what you can do, shielded is a when played ability, so if you're ambushing Rook out, you can choose to ambush first and then put the shield on him, so he'll be shielded still with some damage on him. It's something to bear in mind. Now that would make him more vulnerable to the likes of perilous position, make an opening, takedown that are based on his health pool. So just something to keep in mind, but it is an option. I don't tend to go for that because it doesn't always work out. And then onto Kylo Ren. Initially, I did have 3 of him. That's possibly a little bit excessive, but he is a complete powerhouse because his on attack is give a unit +2 for this phase. I don't think I've got. Oh no, I do have a non-villainy unit right here, but other than that, and it comes in later, so you're not going to make much use of the experience anyway. But yeah, he can pump up himself when he's attacking, so he hits for 8. So you're going to be able to take out any unit pretty much at this stage of the game, or just smack into their base instead. If they have a Sentinel on the ground as well, and you're just going to take it out with Kylo Ren, then you can give a +2 boost to something else, either on the ground or in space, so that you can get in some more damage elsewhere. I've gone for, I only have 1 of Darth Vader, so there's only 1 here. But you can search top 10 cards of your deck for any number of villainy units with combined cost of 3 or less and play each of them for free. So there is the potential that you'll get a combination of your cheaper cost or just a 1/3 cost. And we do have some space units as well, which we'll get onto. Comes in with ambush as well, so hopefully, assuming you have managed to get at least 1 resupply or super laser tech in, you will be able to kill off a unit as well. 1 of Maul, because again, I only have 1 of him, I would be tempted to ditch for Darth Vader for Maul instead to make sure that you are killing something, but Vader does have the advantage that you can probably pull a phase 3 Dark Trooper to get some protection on the ground as well. We do have 2 underworld units, one of them you haven't seen yet, so there is a very small possibility that you'll be able to transfer the damage onto Salacious or the other unit that I'll show in a second. 1 of Emperor Palpatine, I do have 2 of him, but I think I preferred in the 8 resource slot having 2 reinforcement walkers. Whether that's the right decision, I'm not entirely sure yet, but he comes in, is like a overwhelming barrage because you deal 6 damage to enemy units divided as you desire. His stats are poor for an 8 cost, but when you're dealing 6 damage when he comes in, you're not too fussed about that. Does have overwhelm as a bonus, but that's not going to be massively relevant most of the time. Reinforcement Walker, outside of Salacious, this is the only form of healing we have in the deck. But yeah, it's just to kind of come down and pretty much make sure that you're able to win. So you will probably at this stage be making use of the healing rather than the drawing a card ability. But yeah, that's why that is in here. So come on to the wild card. So this is a card that I like to highlight that I think doesn't see a whole lot of play or in the context of a leader that we're looking at. So Pirate Battle Tank, I think, has kind of been forgotten about. It's not a terribly exciting unit, but it is a Sentinel for 6 resources. It's a 4/6 stat line, which is the awkward stat line you're looking for because it's immune to Takedown and Fell the Dragon when it's deployed as is. But the other interesting thing about it is that it has Smuggle, but the Smuggle cost is only 7, so typically Smuggle is the base cost plus 2. But because it's only 7, I think it has a good spot with Vader, because you can play it on 6 as normal, which gives you some protection in advance of Vader coming down, or you can play it for 7 on Vader's deploy, so it still gives him protection. So yeah, I think it does fill a good utility spot in this deck. I've only gone for 2 of them because I think that's all you need, especially when you've got the option of smuggling it out as well. So yeah, I do think this has very good application in this deck. Onto the space units. So this is the legendary that I was talking about. That is pretty much disposable, and you're not really going to miss it if you don't have it. You can just replace it with, I don't know, any other turn 2 resource cost play. My voice is going like a mercenary gunship, but it's just if you happen to be discarding it either via an opponent's effect or your own effect, then you can still play it. So that's the reason it's there. Confederate Tri-Fighter, so we don't have a whole lot of healing within our own deck, so we're not too fussed if we are stopping ourselves from healing, but this will help to disrupt those that like to replay Restored Arcs and Yodas and Kanans and all that good stuff. So, and it's a free resource play, so it's a good space unit for us to have. At this moment in time, green red villainy doesn't have a whole lot of early space options that are particularly useful. So we are kind of limited by what we're able to pick in that sense as well. Imperial Interceptor, so it comes in and you can deal 3 damage to a space unit. So this is a very good ECL target as well because you could ambush into, I guess the ideal is they've got 2 A-Wings out. You kill 1 A-Wing with the when played and then ambush into the other A-Wing. You only receive 1 damage back, so it actually survives as well. But yeah, it just helps to clear out the space arena. This deck is quite weak to Lurking TIE Phantom because if you don't draw any space units, you can't really do anything. Whoops, you can't really do anything about it. So something to bear in mind. Ruthless Raider, just for 2 of them. Again, it's just a good space unit. It's pretty much a staple in red villainy. Comes in 2 damage to enemy base, 2 damage to enemy units. If you've been doing the Vader pings as you go, then it's quite likely you'll be able to finish off an enemy unit when this comes down. Onto our events. So we've got a full fat 3 force throw because we've got a decent smattering of force units, including Vader himself, of course, when he comes down, but he is quite late at that point, so you will probably be using force throw before then. But so long as you have a force unit out, then you'll be able to do damage equal to the cost of the discarded card. You might, so that you know what is going to happen, you might be tempted to force throw one of your own cards, which is not always the worst thing to do if you desperately want to take out a particular enemy unit. Give in to your anger. Now, I think I highlighted this card in the Jango Fett video that I did a while ago, but this card is so good and no one uses it still. Deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. Its controller's next action this phase must be an attack action with that unit. If able, it must attack a unit if able. So what you can do, if you don't have a unit in the same arena as the enemy unit, but you think they're going to buff it with an upgrade or something like a wing leader, that kind of thing, then you can just force them to attack with that unit into your base before they are able to buff it, so it will save you a little bit of damage. That's not the ideal, but the main thing you want to do, let's say you have the pirate battle tank out and your opponent doesn't really want to attack into it, then you use Give into your anger, force your opponent to attack into it with whatever unit you want to get rid of. It has 1 damage. It then attacks into the pirate battle tank for another 4 damage that it takes to itself, and then you might be able to ping it off with Vader, so you've done 6 damage in total. And you've stolen an action from them that they may not want to do, And your battle tank, if it survives, can then attack for 4 into their base or whatever you want. So this card is extremely good. No one uses it. It makes me a bit annoyed, but it's extremely good. I can't stress that enough. And also, I said that Lurking TIE Phantom is a problem. You can use this on the Lurking TIE Phantom so that it attacks into your units. Now, that's probably going to be counterintuitive, to be honest, because the Lurking TIE Phantom gains attack when it attacks, so you're probably better off attacking into it yourself. But yeah, I mean, I've done this a few times with Give In to Your Anger in a few different decks, but using Give In to Your Anger on the Rey leader so that she's forced, because she doesn't have much attack power, she's generally not going to want to attack into units. Using that so that she only hits your unit for 3, and then she takes however much damage back. The other day, I forced her to attack my Darth Vader leader, which finished her off. So, yeah. I can't stress enough how good this card is, and no one uses it. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Well, not completely, but open fire, just simple, deal 4 damage to a unit. In hindsight, to have more turn 1 plays, Force Choke would be a good idea as well, or instead of something, but because we struggle in space to a degree, I wanted open fire for the greater amount of flexibility to hit into space as well. Resupply, pretty essential in this deck so we can get to our later gameplays and Vader leader early, and Overwhelming Barrage, of course, it's green villainy, we are going to have it in there, it's essential, not going to say much more on it. And then the only upgrade that I've gone with is Vader's lightsaber, only the 2 of them, but then we do also have Vader leader and Vader unit, so you've kind of got higher odds of being able to get this out on Vader himself anyway, but it's not an upgrade that you see a whole lot of, so when played, if the attached unit is Darth Vader, you may deal 4 damage to a ground unit. So crucially, this isn't mandatory, so if there is no enemy ground unit, you don't have to hit yourself. But yeah, this can just help to clear out the ground arena when Vader comes down. One thing to remember as well is that it is a unique upgrade, so you can only have 1 out at any one time. But you can, if you already have Vader's lightsaber out, you can then play a second copy, get rid of the old one, and you'll still you'll still be able to activate a new when played effect of another 4 damage to a ground unit. So if you do draw your second one, it's not necessarily an automatic resource choice depending on what is happening in the ground arena. So in terms of other options, I've already mentioned timely intervention. I think if you're not going to go with ECL, then this would be a good substitute to fit in. Force choke, again, because we don't have many turn 1 plays that we're particularly interested in, this will help to fill that slot and get rid of the vast majority of things that come down on the ground. Grenade strike could have a place because if you're doing the Vader ping quite a lot, then you can spread the damage around and then potentially grenade strike to take out 2 units at the same time. The downside of this is that it's not a villainy card itself, so you won't be able to activate Vader's ping off of it. So that does make it a little bit awkward, but it's a possibility. Scanning Officer, this is probably a good sideboard card to have anyway, because depending on what you're against, you can slot this in instead of probably the Seasoned Shore Trooper or whatever trooper. And if you are lucky, it's always good to play in the early game because you only got a few resources to choose from, and when you get a smuggle card in the early game, you tend to resource it just automatically. So if you hit any smuggle cards, you might be meaning that your opponent can't actually play anything that turn, which will set you up very, very nicely. IG-11, so because on attack he does 3 damage to a damaged ground unit because of Vader's ping that you can activate along the way, it's fairly plausible that there will be a damaged ground unit for you to do damage to. He would be a good ECL target, but again, the downside of him is that he is not a villainy card. Traitorous, this is probably another good sideboard card with Scanning Officer, because if you're up against a fairly heavy space deck, or if you are against Lurking TIE Phantom, then this is a pretty good way of dealing with it as well, because you will be able to steal it. And then Relentless, just as a top-end space unit, probably more useful if you're against a control deck, to be honest, but I don't see a massive place for it in the main deck. So, set for scouting, I think there's quite a bit that is potentially useful for what this deck is trying to do. So, I would be tempted to get rid of the Death Star Stormtrooper completely and replace it with First Order Stormtrooper because you are pretty much guaranteed to get some value out of it rather than just deploying the Stormtrooper and then it dies. Because you get the when defeated trigger of 1 indirect damage to a player. So you play this, you do the Vader ping. Even if they then kill this straight away, you've got 2 damage out of it rather than just the 1 with the Vader ping from the Death Star Stormtrooper. So yeah, that's why I would be tempted to replace the Death Star Stormtrooper completely. Fight fire with fire. So this would only be pretty much if you have got your super laser tech out, then you've got 4 resources in total. You play your super laser tech. Instead of doing the Vader ping, you play this instead. You kill your super laser tech, and then you deal 3 damage to the enemy unit, which might take it out. If it doesn't, then you get another resource from your super laser tech, and then you can do the Vader ping. So you can potentially be doing 4 damage to the enemy unit. So yeah, I mentioned that Grenade Strike isn't a villainy card. This isn't either, but out of 2, I would probably go with this rather than Grenade Strike. Allegiant General Pride. So if you have the initiative, you deal 2 indirect damage to a player. So this would be a very good turn 1 play in the deck as it stands, because again, you'll get immediate value out of it versus a Stormtrooper. And it does have the bonus of when indirect damage is dealt to a unit, you can defeat a non-unique upgrade on it. So if someone plays a Crafty Smuggler turn 1, if they choose to put any indirect damage on the Crafty Smuggler, then that shield is gone. TIE Bomber, again, the indirect damage route, plus it's a villainy card, so you get the Vader ping when you play it, as long as you have 1 resource that you can play. So if you're damaging their units as you go along with the Vader ping, then they may find it difficult or tricky to spread that indirect damage around, so it may end up going on their base. The Droid Missile Platform, so it's another non-villainy card, but when defeated, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. So again, if they are wanting to spread their damage around, they are going to have a lot of damage units that you might be able to finish off with a Vader ping later in the game. No Disintegrations, I think, is going to be excellent with this Vader leader, because if you play it when you have 4 resources or more, it's a villainy card. Deal damage to a non-leader unit equal to 1 less than its remaining HP. So what this means with Vader is in 2 actions, you can kill any enemy unit, because this leaves it with 1 HP remaining. You then finish it off with the Vader ping. You can take anything out. So yeah, I think No Disintegrations is going to be pretty much an auto include in this deck going forwards, or this with what this deck is trying to do anyway. IG-2000 is villainy unit, so that's good, but when played, deal 1 damage to each of up to 3 units. So if you've been doing the Vader ping again, or the indirect damage, then this can potentially finish a few things off. IG-88, he is a pilot, but also when he's not a pilot, while an enemy unit is damaged, this unit gets +3, so he is a 7/5 potentially, on and off. Now, again, because of Vader ping, as it stands, it's fairly likely there will be a damaged unit on the opponent's side at any point, so being able to get the 7/5 stat line for IG-88 is, I would say, going to be fairly plausible. He can also be attached as a pilot for 2, and gets the same effect. Now, we don't have much space presence as it stands with the current version of the deck, so whether we would need to buff the space arena somewhat before having IG-88 in here, I'm not sure, but yeah, I think he would be a good option as well. And then there has not been a whole lot of buzz about the Data Vault, but compared to ECL, having an extra 8 health might be worth it, to be honest. your minimum deck size is increased by 10 cards, so you have to have a 60 card deck. But you can then fill those extra slots with things like timely intervention to mitigate for the loss of the ambush ability from ECL. You can put in more turn one plays, which we are lacking at the moment. So yeah, I would be strongly thinking about whether the data vault is actually what we want instead of ECL. Planetary bombardment, so 6 costs, still 8 indirect damage to a player. Unfortunately, it is not a villainy card, so you won't be able to get a Vader ping as well if they leave any of their units with only 1 health remaining. But if you control a capital ship unit as well, then deal 12 indirect damage instead. So if you have got a Ruthless Raider out, that is the only capital ship in the main deck as it stands. Then the next phase on Vader's deploy, do the planetary bombardment, 12 damage spread around. It's going to kill their whole arena and damage their base, or leave their units with 1 HP. And then when Vader comes down on attack, he can finish a unit off. Turbo Laser Salvo, kind of similar functionality to Planetary Bombardment, but choose an arena, a friendly space unit deals damage equal to its power to each enemy unit in that arena. So again, we don't have this, as it stands, we don't have many space units that have a whole lot of power. In fact, we have no space units with much power. The strongest is Ruthless Raider, and that is only a 4 powered unit, but with the new set and Devastator in particular, this will be a lot more viable. And then Devastator itself, so you assign all indirect damage you deal to opponents, so obviously this combined with Planetary Bombardment is utter filth, and also when played, deal 4 indirect damage to each opponent, and you get to choose where it goes. So yeah, I could definitely see a spot for a Devastator or two in a future version of this deck as well. So that is the deck as it stands at the moment. As I said earlier, I would probably swap the Shore Trooper for the First Legion Snow Trooper and have the full 3 of those. Probably do need a few more turn 1 plays as well, maybe a Force Choke, but I'm fairly happy with how it's performed so far. It is a case of getting to your 6 and 7 resource plays and 8 resource plays as quickly as possible and swinging things around from there. And you do have Overwhelming Barrage to help you out along the way if you don't quite get to there as quickly as possible. But yeah, let me know what you think. I don't see a whole lot of Vader out there. I think he does have, I think he's always had potential, but it's kind of been forgotten about to a certain extent. But yeah, let me know what you think. And I think the next video is going to be another Twin Suns one with a Quinlan Voss Mace Windu pairing. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.